So tell
Okay.
us about how was your break? Do you sinned effectively?
I double sinned, yes,
Double
and now I
sin.
have,
Whoa.
yeah, double sin. Yeah.
All right. So you're really ready to be redeemed.
Yes, I am all ready. I am ready.
Uh-huh. And how are you
Absolutely.
gonna redeem yourself, you think?
By coming up with just painfully brilliant uh, ideas.
That's interesting. You would think that coming up with brilliant ideas is how you redeem yourself of sin. That's
Painfully brilliant.
interesting. Painfully brilliant. That's right. So there is pain,
Yes.
but I notice,
Brilliant ideas come with pain.
yeah, okay, but I notice it's not doing good for others. It's not getting right with God. It's not going to a rabbi or priest or something. It's having painfully brilliant ideas is how you are redeemed from sin.
Right. Yes. I'm still in the experiment of being selfish,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
self-absorbed, and all that.
Right. Well, it is a bid for autonomy,
Yep.
so I can respect that.
That's
So,
that's what they say.
speaking of
Yeah.
autonomy, in our
Right.
conversation, we talked a lot about autonomy, and we teased about a future show we're going to do on autonomy and its enemies. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and but for now, we got up to we were talking about the different foundings of the United States because Christian nationalism is fundamentally it's based on a claim that the United States is a Christian nation, was founded as a Christian nation,
Mm-hmm.
should always be a Christian nation, whatever that means. It means something that religious, certainly religious Christian ideas and maybe religious Christian authorities should have power, should hold sway, should guide the country on its path, and have a mandate to actually oppose ideas and political movements and authorities that are opposed to those things, as
Right.
they see it. So we got it. We talked about the roots of this, and of course, as we noted, a lot of the so far as you call it a controversy or an ambiguity has to do with what you mean by the founding of the United States. And we noted there are
Mhm.
actually many different points and places and times and ways of thinking that you could all describe as feeding into the founding. But let's say if you had to pick one, the Declaration of Independence would be the one. The July 4th, 1776. Actually, so it was July 2nd they voted on it. July 4th they signed it. So, but we
Mhm.
celebrate July 4th. Um, and we talked about how the Enlightenment ideas were that Thomas Jefferson in particular was so very careful and so eloquent and graceful in creating this synthesis of Christian ideas, Christian notions with Enlightenment ideas and notions in the language of the Declaration. Uh, so then we're done, right? Or why is there? Why? But the problem is the synthesis was so graceful and clever that it maybe buried the tensions for a time.
Yeah. Yeah. It buried the tensions, and it's kind of like covered up gracefully, as you phrased it very well, the underlying potential tensions in the confrontation between the theistic aspirations and Enlightenment principles.
Mm-hmm.
And they were always brewing in there, with some periods of perhaps cooperation and some periods of clashes.
Well, you would think now let's get to the next step, which is the Constitution. I mean, we won the Revolutionary War. We signed the Treaty of Paris. Nice bit of trivia. There are three documents that created the United States: the Declaration of Independence, which declared independence; the Treaty of Paris, which ended the war, got the acknowledgement from Great Britain of our independence, and defined the initial boundaries of the United States; and the third, the Constitution. Trivia question: there's one person who signed all three. Who's that?
Thomas Jefferson?
Benjamin
No?
Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin?
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Okay. Yeah, Benjamin Franklin, of course, because he was the ambassador to France.
He was the ambassador to France, and
So
also
he had to sign that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so he and John Adams were both. Let's see, it was John Adams. So why wasn't John Adams on all three? I don't know. But he's Jefferson by the time of the Constitution was off in Paris serving as ambassador to France,
Yeah.
taking over from Franklin earlier. And so we're now we're crafting the Constitution. Surely, if we're going to say this is a Christian nation, we're going to say so here.
Hey, yeah. And I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm. You have many questions for me, I notice. And I just want to. All I want is this the last one finally?
Indefinitely many. So for every question I have, there will be another one.
So this is like the Hilbert Hotel.
Exactly.
So the Hilbert Hotel, for those who don't know, so this is this is a hotel with infinitely many rooms. And part of the trick of the Hilbert Hotel, what's so exciting about it, is that it can be completely full and yet still have room for lots more people to arrive. Because
infinitely many.
Infinitely many. And
new arrivals will still get a room.
Yes.
Still get a room.
Right, because you just have everybody in room 1, move to room 2, move to room 3, and so on, and then you open up a new room at room 1. And
right. That is supposed to be a reduction ad absurdum of actual infinity.
Yeah.
But the question I have for you is, in the original Constitution, prior to the amendments, there's one reference to religion. Which article is that? Is that the fifth article?
Says there shall be no religious test for holding office.
Which article is that? Do you remember?
I do not.
I think it's Article 5 or 4. I don't remember. Or 6 maybe.
I should know that. I do not.
Okay. Fair enough.
That's the only mention, correct. The only mention of religion in the original Constitution is one that says there shall not be a religious test for holding office.
So if the framers of the constitutions would have agreed with the claims of Christian nationalism, then they would have for sure put in, instead of that article, they would have put in, there shall be a religious test.
The opposite, in fact.
The opposite. You would think so, if they had that intention.
Yeah.
So where do you want to go now?
Well, I'm going to go to Kiev.
In our discussion.
Not me.
I knew you're going to go. I knew you're going to do this.
I'm going.
Everybody,
I'm going to Ukraine. See my Ukrainian flag. I'm going to Ukraine next week. Pini's already on his way. Those who are already fans of Pini Ben-Or, our co-host, and we will. He and I will be coming to you live from Kiev, Ukraine next week. Or I hope he joins us. He's making noises like he's not sure, but we'll talk about that Ukraine things later on.
Yeah.
So where do I want to go with this discussion? Okay, so let's talk a little more about the Constitution. We have our. I'm going to tease the words. We'll go into more later about the difference between our covenant and our social contract. But we have a Constitution that is based on the social contract theories of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. That is, it is deemed as a contract entered into freely of the people with each other. The source of legitimate authority is summed up in the first 3 words.
We the people.
We the people. We the people are the ones who enter into this
and
agreement.
As important as the 3 words are the other words. In order to form a more perfect union, establish, to form a more perfect union, which implies that the union established by the Constitution at the time is not perfect yet.
Well, it says more, and there's a Eric Foner, the historian, American a historian of American history who focuses on the Reconstruction period. He teases that a lot of people say the United States was born perfect and it's been getting better ever since.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I have a minor big idea point.
A minor big idea point. I cannot wait to hear this contradiction unfolding. Please continue.
You see, that's because I have to teach you a little bit paraconsistent logic. But
Okay.
forget about that.
Okay.
The minor big idea is this. We the people. So what is the we referring to? We the people.
Okay.
So are the framers of the Constitution wrote that, and they consider themselves as representing all the people?
Well, they are in the position, I mean, if you would think of this as a social contract, they are in the position of the lawyers drafting the contract. They are agents for the people. Now
So they are representing the people.
Essentially, yeah. But the people are going to have the opportunity to review it. So they're not representatives in the sense that a political agent is delegated to act with authority on behalf of someone else. They are they are going to draft this and then present it to the people for ratification. So it's not representation like if you elect a governor, and the governor, acts and has wields executive authority. Not every action of the governor has to be then ratified by the population
Right.
each time. So they're not representatives quite in that sense. They're in a weaker sense of they're acting as drafting agents, trying their best to understand what the people want, but then the people will have the opportunity to review the work prior to its enactment. Did that address your question?
No,
Okay.
it took us some steps towards,
Okay.
but it didn't fully address it
Interesting. It
because
took us some steps forward, even though I'd never moved. Because you know why? The Earth can move. That's why.
well, you always move, yeah, in that sense.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. So they were not elected to represent in the normal sense, in the current sense of electing representatives. So their station is not as representatives in the sense in which we understand our representatives that we elect.
It's in Congress. Yeah.
Congress, yeah. The role of the people to certify the document they produced, namely the original Constitution, was post writing it. They said, we write it and then we present it to you.
Mm-hmm.
So my interest is which role, how are we going to describe, what is the role description of the framers when they wrote We the People? It's not representative via elections, but they were not elected.
Okay, first off, they kind of were elected. I mean, they're coming from the legislatures of the 13 colonies, or the now 13 states. So they were indirectly chosen by as to represent their respective states.
I see. Okay, so I see. So they were elected.
They were. I don't know. It might have been different in different states. I don't know exactly how these particular people got chosen by their respective state legislatures, but there was a process based on democratic representation that led to these people being collected together in the summer of 1787 in Philadelphia to draft this Constitution.
Okay.
Based ultimately in voting.
Okay. All right. Okay, so the minor big question idea is set aside for now.
Okay.
I have to think about it.
Okay. Now to focus on this question of we the people, because this is actually really important for the Christian Nationalist project and those who might be opposed to it. Because it says right up front, the source of authority here, the ones entering into this contract are the people.
Yes.
We the people, collectively. And there is no mention of Jesus, God, Christianity,
right.
Church. The only mention is no religious test for office in the original Constitution. And then we can note a few years later, the First Amendment is adopted, which makes two mentions of religion. One, no, there should be no established church. There shall be no establishment with Congress shall make no law with respect to an establishment of religion, nor abridging the free exercise thereof. So, no established church but free expression. So it bakes in a respect for religious pluralism.
Mm-hmm.
No singular church, and no restriction of religious observance. And those are both baked in. So if you're going to argue that you put all this together and nonetheless you look at all this and you say, yep, that's a Christian nation they were putting together. You got a steep hill to climb.
Right.
It's hard to do this, but that's I'm not sure what else we need to say about the Constitution per se, except that this has this picture of no established church, respect for religious pluralism, and no test for office. Certainly no explicit claim to religious authority as a source of legitimate grounding for policy, for governance, for public office holding. This has been the strong American tradition from these beginnings.
Yes.
Yeah. So when to the question I posed at the start of part one, we're now in, by the way, in part two. What I posed at the start of part one is that to what extent do Christian nationalists have a point? They have certainly a strong cultural and traditional. There's strong cultural groundings, strong traditions in Christianity that they can point to. But they don't have very good grounds when we look at the formal documents and or the legal traditions of the United States. They do have a grounding, perhaps stronger in some state governments. That is, the states were given a lot more leeway. Explicitly, it says that Congress shall make no laws about. So the original meaning of the First Amendment applied to federal law, not to state law, and there, in fact, was effectively an established church. For example, in Connecticut, in the through the 1790s, was Congregationalism. There were the states could have a lot more, if they chose, have more explicit religious language. The state constitution of Iowa, I happen to know, makes reference to God in its preamble, even though, and I'm not sure, I can't remember Massachusetts. I didn't check them all out. But the point is, there was federalism, which was codified in the 10th Amendment, which grants to the states any powers not explicitly delegated to the federal government, states or to the people, gives a lot of leeway, a lot of opening for religious authority in public life, as long as it stays at the state level.
Yeah, you see, that's another point. The tradition, the legal tradition, let me be precise here, again interpreted the term Congress in the First Amendment as any governmental authority at any level.
Later it does, not at the beginning.
Yeah, that's what, not at the beginning, but I'm saying the legal tradition moved in that direction. And therefore, I think the legal tradition interpreted the First Amendment, the term Congress, again, as a placeholder for any government authority at any level.
Yeah.
That has been the traditional interpretive tradition.
Well, the opening for that really comes at the end of the Civil War and the Reconstruction period with the passage of the 14th Amendment, which includes critically the so-called equal protection laws. Equal protection clause says that essentially that it grants that all individuals who are citizens of any state are citizens of the United States, and that includes, says not just Congress but also states must grant the equal protection of the laws to all citizens. That is, the law must treat everyone equally, and in other ways, both formally and in terms of tradition, the Civil War and the post-war Reconstruction and specifically the 14th Amendment grants for the first time a very explicit role to the federal government to intervene in the state level and sets up the federal government as a guarantor of individual rights in a way that it did not have before, and that was clearly very much in their mind was to look after the welfare of the freed slaves. That sets up this federal government would be the guarantor of the security and the legal standing of the freed slaves.
Right.
That was very clearly the intent of the 14th Amendment.
But I want to put a pin on this phrase that I've been using now regarding two issues. The idea of a placeholder. I want to put a pin on that because it would be very interesting to see the extent to which either originally or in the legal tradition, certain words and phrases were either originally or in the tradition interpreted as placeholders for a more general concept.
Yeah. For example, we've got an enormously important Supreme Court case pending at the Supreme Court about the so-called sovereign state legislators theory.
Yeah.
So North Carolina, gerrymandered Republican-led legislature has passed a law which says essentially grants to the legislature the right to choose its representatives to the Electoral College, its Electoral College delegates, based on language in the Constitution that grants the right to choose the electors to the legislatures of the several states. And this, traditionally here, legislatures has been interpreted as a placeholder, means the state government through its legitimate democratic processes.
Right.
And the claim before the court now is based on an interpretation that says, no, this means quite literally the state legislature. State legislators can do this in any manner that they see fit, and they are not obliged to even honor their own constitutions of their states. They're not obliged to honor the results of elections. They're not obliged to honor anything. The legislature, full stop, does whatever it wants. Which is what you're saying is literally what this says. So whether it's a placeholder or literal, the fate of the republic could actually turn on that.
Absolutely,
on that
decision.
On that decision.
But it's very important for me, for a broader discussion that goes beyond this particular current segment, to see the ramifications of thinking of various phrases as placeholders and how the legal tradition interpreted as placeholders for a broader concept, and therefore what kind of covenantal ideas and norms guide the nature of that broader concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it relates to our whole discussion
Yes,
about
it
the
does.
covenantal element.
Right.
You see?
And whether whether you interpret these so many places in understanding legal text, religious text, do you understand something as metaphorical or literal?
Mm-hmm.
There's, of course, a strong tradition in some parts of Protestant Christianity in particular that argue for the literal interpretation, whatever that might mean, of biblical text as the source of religious authority, guide to truth, and so on.
Right. And I should add also that this way of thinking of it, in terms of the idea of a placeholder, it has ramifications regarding the debate of originalism versus living constitution.
Yeah.
Because if the legal tradition interpreted some phrases as placeholders, that meant that they were not thinking of these phrases as in terms of literal originalism.
Yeah, that's right. And so I like to I like to tease religious literalists by noting that Jesus ordered us, judge the tree by the fruit it bears. Now, is this advice in horticulture? Is that what he's talking about? Or was there something else going on that Jesus was talking about?
Right. Exactly. I would like to revert back, if you don't mind, to a phrase you used before, way early, which was theocracy.
Yes.
And so I want to take the discussion a little bit to the goals of Christian nationalism.
Yeah. So now we've gone through the Constitution, through the Civil War, and there's a burst of fundamentalism in the early 20th century, and we come up through the Civil Rights era, and there's some key court cases. For example, the one they go to all the time, they're taking God out of the schools because the Supreme Court case said, no, you cannot have Christian prayer in public schools. You cannot have Christian symbolism in public institutions. They look at as the Christian nationalists look at this as this is at the center of what they call the activist liberal court. Actually, though they don't talk about this one very much, a really important case that they care about very much is there's a case against Bob Jones University to strip the university of its tax-exempt status on the grounds that they were engaged in racial discrimination in admissions. It was a white-only university, but it was a tax-exempt institution, and the IRS, I think it was saying, no, we're not going to let you do that anymore. And this was actually quite the argument among the Christian right was that they are interfering in our free exercise of our religion, of our religious beliefs, and this gets up to the Master Cake case, which argued that a cake maker who did not wish to make a cake for a gay couple who is getting married is exercising his religious freedom by not by not exercising his creativity in claiming that this is like an artistic practice to make a wedding cake, and compelling him as an individual not just to run a factory but to express himself. This is an expression of his selfhood, his individuality when he makes a cake, and that compelling him to do this for a gay couple and thus to participate in the sanctification of their union, which goes against his beliefs, is a restriction of his religious freedom. So this kind of brings us rapidly up to today. Let's talk about now theocracy.
Right. And I just, before we talk about theocracy and what I wanted to chime in on that, The case that you just mentioned, and we should
Master
put a pin
Cake,
on this.
Master Cake
Yes.
Bakery. Yeah.
And of course, there are many other cases. It's a broader thing. Has to do with the new, with the departure of most Christian churches from the 70s or so, gradually, from the older tradition where their religious practice is a private matter to be practiced at home and in the institutions designed to provide religious life, like churches and so forth. And that conception that was previously dominating the Christian Protestant churches, in particular the Southern Baptist Church, was infiltrated by the Dominionists.
Who are they?
Dominionists basically are the spiritual or the inspiration to what currently you call Christian nationalism. Mm-hmm. And it started in the 70s with this preacher, which I forgot his name right now, who basically called for ending the older tradition that religion is a private matter, and basically called for a new regime where Christianity has to be expressed at all aspects of one's life, everywhere.
Is that? But I'm not sure if this is right. Paul Weyrich? No.
Not necessarily. No. It's the guy who started Reconstructionism.
Yeah. I can't remember you talking. I know who you. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll look that up for next time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and his students, by the way, promoted that. Eventually, they infiltrated the Southern Baptist Church and gradually changed it to this new tradition where a Christian, where you can't have this more or less clear line between the private sphere and the public sphere when it comes to a person of faith. You take your faith everywhere. If you go to your business, which happens to be a bakery, then you take your faith with you. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you are informed by whatever you believe to be the tenets of the faith in your activities in the business. If you go, for example, to political activities, then same thing. Which is why you see more and more throughout the last few decades, churches quite explicitly and without any concern are engaged in political activity.
Yeah, electoral politics, endorsing candidates.
Yes, exactly. Policies, positions. And I want to just, again, put a pin. There's so many pins here that I don't have enough of them. And
you need in the Hilbert Hotel, they have enough pins.
Yes, right. In the academic sphere, this change is promoted by way of specific concepts. One of them is worldview. Everybody must have a worldview, and the worldview has several elements, and they take their worldview everywhere. And the other concept that is, and I hope I'll get it right, is, what is it? Let me think for a moment. Is it will come to me. Basic idea is the same. That is that your religion is with you no matter where you go. And therefore, it must inform you at all activities, whether it is at home, at church, or anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, if you put together these concepts, one, that you take your religion with you everywhere you go, and everything you do is therefore an expression of your religious self,
Hmm.
plus a claim that your free exercise of religion uh, shall not be abridged. Well, you're saying the government can't stop you from really anything that you want to do,
Exactly.
because everything you
Exactly.
do is a religious expression, and the Constitution says you cannot inhibit someone's expression of their religious beliefs.
Exactly.
There,
And
you say
this
there is no religious sphere smaller than all of
then
society, all of
all of
business,
society. Exactly.
all of everything.
Exactly. And so in the more academic territory, these concepts are designed to basically piecemeal empty the establishment clause from any content.
Mm-hmm.
So there are two groups. One group, which by the way involves some Catholics too, that demand
What do they call them? Structural
integralists.
integralist Catholics, right?
Yeah. And the integralist and fairly large portion of the more Christian evangelical tradition, parents, together want to outright abolish the establishment clause, which is kind of the legal term for this church-state separation.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there can't be any, so they want to abolish it. But the more moderate ones want to essentially empty it of any content piecemeal with these devices of worldview and the integration of religion into all of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's called, I think now is the word, integration.
Integration. Okay. So this is a good, we're going to have to wrap up soon, but this is a good segue into Dominionism and the Dominionist project. Tell us about that.
But before I tell you about that, I just want to talk about the theocracy issue.
Mm-hmm.
You see, sometimes when you say that some of the claims made by certain religious people or religiously oriented people, that they are aspiring for theocracy, they say, no, not at all. So I came up with a distinction, a threefold distinction about classifying theocracies.
Okay.
And so there's absolute theocracy, exemplified in Iran, where the religious leaders and the political leaders are exactly the same.
Right. The religious leaders are themselves issuing political rules.
Yeah.
And
Now, hybrid theocracy is more exemplified in the case of Saudi Arabia, where the official political leaders and the religious leaders are separate, but the religious leaders have huge influence on the political leaders, a sway on everything they do.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is theocratic legalism, which I borrowed from a huge literature on autocratic legalism.
Mm-hmm.
And theocratic legalism is the idea that religious communities will utilize the democratic process to take power, and then change the laws and the policies and the principles to conform to their ideologies. So,
and I think the example we could give is Hungary.
Is Hungary, exactly. So,
and arguably Poland, although less so. And let me, I
just want to say this, that the Christian nationalists are now, what the phase that we see right now is theocratic legalism.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They want to use the democratic process in order to claim legitimate authority and then introduce more and more laws inspired by religious tenets. And the Supreme Court is now captured by that, by those people.
Well, let me push back. What's wrong with that? Doesn't every group organize itself to advance its
Exactly.
interests? Why?
Exactly.
I'm,
Right.
but okay. I mean, I can. So, what is the difference between what you just described and what you might call traditional interest-driven political organizing? What's the difference?
Exactly.
What do you
This
mean
is
exactly? It's
exact.
not a rhetorical question. I want to know what's the difference.
I know it's not a rhetorical question. This is exactly the kind of arguments that I have been having with a friend of mine here, who I take to be what I call soft Christian nationalist.
Mm-hmm.
And it is this: look, this country is free and democratic. Each group can try to promote their values through the public domain.
Mm-hmm. Their values and their interests, both.
Their interests and their values, and compete with other groups and interests. And so, what's wrong if what I am promoting, the values and interests, are informed by religious concerns? What's wrong with that?
I don't know.
That's
What's
your
wrong with it?
question.
That's my question.
That's your question. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could give you an answer, but I want to hear your answer.
My answer?
Yeah.
Well, you can promote your values, even if they're religiously inspired, in the public domain in order to convince me and Athena and other people to adopt those values in their private life. So you can try to convince me to convert to Christianity and follow in my life those tenets. What I think is against the very spirit of this country is to say that what I want to do is to promote my Christian values in the public domain in order to convert them into political power, and then impose them through laws and various other means on everybody, whether they personally accept them or not.
Mm-hmm.
That is where it contradicts the traditions and the very explicit statements in the Constitution and the tradition of the country.
Yeah. Yeah, and the now let's. I mean, I would agree. There's that what you commit to as an American, what you commit to as a member of this or any democratic constitutional republic, is that there is a certain neutral level of the political domain that we all work within, and that there are bounds and norms that you respect, that everyone has rights, everyone and you must, may have the there's a difference between being a player in the game and trying to take over who's the referee of the game, if you want to. Although there's never, in politics, a complete distinction. You acknowledge the religious standing of all the other communities and their legitimate interests, and you don't try to make yours the only ones that have standing. So let's talk about dominionism.
Okay. Dominionism is basically the tradition which basically informs the following: Christianity should dominate all aspects of the United States life to start with. Then once that happens, then Christianity should be also from the country. The political, economic, military resources of the country should then begin the process of imposing Christianity on all the rest of the world.
So it's to use the government. So, and there's this concept of the seven mountains. The seven mountains are the seven. Are seven most important sectors of society. So that's governments, law, media, business, academia. I forget the other two, but you get the point. There are these seven, and the Christians, not just Christian values and beliefs, but Christians should get themselves into positions of authority and control over each of these.
That's
and
right.
they've got a project they're working on. This is like they got their checklists and they got their funding and their organizations
and they have the organization, they have the journals, they have the publications, and they have different fronts on which this program is being waged. For example, the Intelligent Design Institute, I think it still goes by the same name, was conceived by this guy in California who wanted to wage this fight at the academic layer.
Specifically against the theory of evolution through natural selection.
Exactly.
Darwin's theory.
Right. And the so-called wedge strategy that he promoted was the following. Push intelligent design and religion as a comparative with science. And his strategy was, it doesn't matter whether you have good arguments or bad arguments, or whether you're defeated in this particular debate or that particular thing or that. That doesn't matter. The point was to juxtapose religion and science and make it into a subject matter so that religion can piggyback on the legitimacy of science and acquire that kind of legitimacy.
Right. That kind of legitimacy.
Just by putting them together.
Right. And you look at they have journals they publish in, and you look at them and they look just like a scientific journal.
That's right.
Every detail.
Exactly. Yeah. So the idea is it's what Bernard Russell called theft over honest toil, basically.
What is it?
Theft over honest toil.
Theft over honest toil?
Right.
Okay.
So in other words, you acquire legitimacy by juxtaposition yourself in the public next to something that has genuine legitimacy due to work they've done. And now you create a subject matter, and the religion now acquires legitimacy from the work that science did in the last 300 years.
Right. And then you have people saying, well, why not just teach both sides? Why not teach the controversy? Why not be open and have freedom of speech and free? What are you against free inquiry for? Why are you?
And the premier philosophical site, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. If you go there,
Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Big shout out. Very good. Very good. Go on.
The best, the top, as an entry, science and religion. Now, we at GCC in this semester had critical dialogues, God and Truth event, and the topic was basically science and religion, and we had 4 panelists, including myself, and my whole topic was, what's the subject matter?
Yeah, what is the subject matter
to
which these both apply? And the answer is there is none. Therefore, these don't belong in the same breath.
Thing. It's like having science and Shakespeare. It's like, okay, what is exactly are you comparing here? In other words, I was trying to protest against the juxtaposition and the borrowing of legitimacy for religion from science, as if religion has explanatory power like science does in some way. And let's look exactly what are the similarities and differences. Religion has no explanatory power. It didn't contribute anything to medicine, aviation, mechanics, geology, physics, just to start with.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to sum up this discussion we've been having, which I found
Okay,
fantastic.
so we are here still for another 2 hours.
Yeah. So yeah, I know you got a lot of sin you need to do today. So to start, we've got Christian nationalism, this movement that is trying that has a program. They claim their program is to restore America to its Christian roots. Others who are less generous or charitable might say it is an attempt to take a control that they did not previously have, but the goal in any case is to have Christian ideas, Christian doctrine, Christian political leaders with substantial control over the governance of the United States and in more extreme versions, laws, media, business, and other important parts of American society, and there is a very explicit program in place of organizations, institutions that are attempting to do this. I've read that their dream candidate was Mike Pence. He's the one who was going to carry their torch into the White House, and may explain his almost bottomless willingness to humiliate himself because he's a true believer in this project.
Yes. Yeah.
So what's at stake besides the obvious political stakes are the conceptual stakes about is America devoted based on concepts of human autonomy and human freedom based on autonomy and based on the individual's capacity to flourish themselves by finding their own way, or will it be based on a religious conception that you can only flourish in a Christian worldview and a Christian lifestyle within a Christian community? And although we haven't talked, we'll talk about it on a different program. Because there's a whole interesting academic side where there's a bunch of academics who are attacking the very concept of autonomy and trying to replace it with dignity. You don't need to be autonomous, which assumes decision-making power for yourselves. You just need to have dignity as a
and not just that. It is also that the laws and policies do not have to recognize autonomy, right, but rather merely the dignity of each individual.
Right. So
whatever dignity means.
Right. Which
here,
and that goes straight like now get rid of abortion. We don't have to have abortion rights. You don't have to have autonomous control of your own body. You just need to have those who are exercising authority over you recognize your dignity.
Dignity, whatever that
means. So you don't have to be the decision maker as long as those who are deciding for you recognize your dignity, whatever that means. And that's absolutely fundamental shift in what we think of as freedom and what we think of as the purpose of the United States as a place that secures your freedoms and allows you to flourish through the exercise of your own free will. That's what's at stake. And so they are right, certainly, in saying the fundamental nature of the United States is what's on the table. The fundamental nature. Exactly. So they're right about that. Well, let's agree on that. The fundamental nature. I'm going to, and if they're in charge of a lot of institutions. They basically captured the Supreme Court. They've captured a number of state legislatures. They have a great many representatives in Congress who adhere to this. Great large share of the population. The resilience, incredible resilience of Donald Trump's support which seems just incredible, just unshakable, is quite a large share of it is based on the Christian nationalists who see him as their vehicle to political power.
Right, and I should mention that we haven't discussed at all here the connection traditionally and currently between Christian nationalism and white supremacy.
Yeah, well, that we'll have to come to because that's another huge, whole important topic.
Yes.
I want to close though by noting how this is also a religious mistake. They're engaged in idolatry.
Right.
They are looking to political power as the goal of their religious activity, rather than their own spiritual renewal and the spiritual renewal of their communities. I heard the best line: Jesus did not come to seize control of the Roman Empire. So why are you trying to seize control of this Roman Empire? That's not what Jesus was about. That's not what you should be about as a follower of Jesus.
The problem is that many of the visible people and many of the religious leaders, former because they always only look at the cover of the Bible, don't read what is between the two covers. And the latter because they have given up, whether they completely realize it or not, on the idea that they can achieve goals through persuasion.
Yeah.
They gave up on that and they decided to go with power.
The political scientists offer there are three ways to get somebody to do something. There's persuasion, coercion, and remuneration. You talk them into it, you force them into it, or you pay them to do it. Well, paying people to adopt your religious beliefs is at best a very temporary solution. They're essentially saying they see that they are losing. They see that they're losing the political game, and they are forced to choose between political power and commitment to democracy, and they've made their choice. And the demographics are working against them ferociously.
Yep.
They're
demographic, the younger generation.
Younger generation is appalled by this stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, a former friend of mine saw this years ago, and he always promoted the idea that the voting age should be 35.
Yes, of course. The voting rights should be restricted to those who are going to very likely agree with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah,
I think voting should only be...
Yeah, voting age of 35 was a placeholder for whoever agrees with me. Because by 35, you're going to come to your senses and agree with everything I want you to.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you almost... I do not, but I'd say at least I have a preference for the clear, explicit vulgarity of a Donald Trump who says, I will recognize the legitimacy of the election if I win.
If I win.
Because he's not pretending. He's not sugarcoating. He's like,
no.
He's you know, and it's not a joke.
No, we know that.
Yeah. So on that note, this has, I think, been a fantastic discussion about Christian nationalism.
I agree.
Many more angles to follow up on in the academic side. The relationship to white supremacy is very potent, but we're not going to do that just next, because do you see this flag? Did I tell you about the flag?
Yeah.
What about it? It's a flag of?
I have no idea.
Well, you know those pins you keep talking about the pins. Well,
Yeah.
I'm using, so that's why there's no pins, because I'm using them to hold up the flag, which is the
Okay.
flag of Ukraine. And as of next week, Pini and I will be in Kiev, Ukraine, where we are each teaching at the Kiev School of Economics. Tell you more about those courses, but next time probably. And we're going to start 4-part live streaming series on Ukraine, what's going on over there, because the fight against authoritarianism, the fight for the survival of liberal democracy, is happening not just in the US, it's happening around the world. And one of the key front lines right now is in Ukraine, where authoritarianism in the form of the Russian military is very explicitly trying to seize control of a democratic society, Ukraine. And I see this, part of the reason I'm going to Ukraine and I'm so interested in Ukraine is because I see this as the same fight. This is the same fight as the one here. It's many of the same players, in fact.
That's right.
And a lot of the same money. So we're going to...
And by the way, I should add also that you guys are volunteering to teach.
We are volunteering to do this.
Yeah.
That's right. So we're going on our own time and our own dime. And we are really, but we get so much from this, in particular, the chance to interact with these great Ukrainian students who I've grown to love. We're going to do 4 weeks, a series of 4 live streams on Ukraine and on how the independence movement, the revolution of dignity, and the war in the past year plus with Russia is changing Ukraine and reshaping its social covenant. So there's going to be on so 4 Saturdays at the same time. That'll be 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific, and from Ukraine 5 p.m. in Kiev. First on so April 22nd on civil society and volunteerism, how that's changed and what's distinctively going on there. Second, about language and literature and the decolonization of the mind and of the arts and the shift to Ukrainian language and rejection of Russian. Third, on the education system, and fourth, on sex, gender, and LGBT rights and in the Ukrainian social covenant. Really excited about this series coming up. Peter, I'm hoping you'll be able to join us for that. And we will, with that, any final words?
Yeah, I would like to borrow from you that dime that takes you with a dime to Ukraine, to flight and the whole thing. That's a very, very unique dime, must be.
Well, let me tell you,
all it's cost you, the whole trip cost you a dime. Man,
it is
very expensive dime.
This has to do with the debt ceiling. So what happens is that the Republicans in Congress are saying they're not going to honor to pay the bills of the United States that we have already incurred. They're going to throw the United States into default on its debts unless they get their way on various things. So one way around this is to effectively increase the debt ceiling by minting a very valuable coin and putting it under deposit at the Federal Reserve. And so the Federal Reserve has reached out to us and is asking us to test run this coin. And that's what we're using to, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Okay then.
Well, wonderful to chat with you.
And with you as
Athena.
always.
Wonderful. And see you next week.
See you next week from Ukraine. Slava Ukraini?
From Ukraine.
Okay.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.